All right, this is the fourth of our mini lectures for Module 2. Before we go on to mortality, I want to make some comments regarding the factors that affect fertility and, in fact, that first half of our equation, which is the births. First of all, one of the things that we see is that when we talk about total fertility rate, and by extension, crude birth rate, is that this is about women. Again, not surprisingly, I guess that's kind of a statement of the obvious. Women give birth, and so the conditions for women strongly influence fertility rates. First of all, the clearest, and again, many studies have been conducted on this, the clearest and most direct way to influence fertility rates is education for women. And you'll notice in this graph, I can't make a stronger case that if we look at all of these countries, in other words, what we have here is on our horizontal axis, we have the mean years of schooling for women, and on the vertical axis, we have total fertility rate. So again, total fertility rate decreases as years of schooling available to women increase. Okay? So again, higher the rates of education for women, the lower the fertility rates. And that, again, is a very, very strong correlation. We can also see that affluence has something to do with it. Okay, it's not quite as strong, but it is a significant indicator. As a population's GDP per capita goes up, fertility rates drop. And so again, conditions for women, overall affluence in a society, educational opportunities for women, all influence total fertility rates. It is also true the availability of contraception for women. In other words, this is contraceptive prevalence, any method, by women ages 15 to 49. And again, not surprisingly, a very, very strong correlation. The availability and use of contraception significantly reduces total fertility. It is important to note that that's the availability for women. Now, what we also see, though, is that some of these factors also influence, there's a geography, if you will, of young births. Especially in the United States, we find this to be a very, very interesting characteristic. In other words, what we have here is teen birth rates, 15 to 19, in 2008, if we use as the example, this is consistently the case. What we notice here is that our highest states are all this southern belt, and that our lowest states are here. And so we have to ask again, what is the culture of that? And as we get into cultural geography later, we may begin to talk about why that is the case. But I want you to look at how clear this disparity is in the map in terms of issues of teen birth rates. And so again, consider issues of affluence, education, and opportunities for women. If we look at this, though, the good, I guess, way of saying this is that if we look at all of these trends, they are again downward. Births for females 15 to 19, that is kind of that youngest cohort, have all gone down between 1960 and 2014. And so it's changing. Opportunities for women are increasing. Now, one of the last measures I want to talk about is this idea of the rate of natural increase. And quite simply, remember that the rate of natural increase, or RNI, is in a sense the way that a population is going to grow. And this is natural. We say natural because it excludes movement of people. So crude birth rate minus crude death rate divided by 10. Now the reason we divide it by 10 is to get a percent, because these are both in what we call per mils. This is birth rates per crude birth rate is births per thousand in a population. Death rates is deaths per thousand in a population. We divide it by 10 to go from per mil to percent, quite simply. The other thing that's really nice about this is that once you have that rate of natural increase, you can figure out how long it's going to take a population to double in size. And we call this the doubling time. And so what we can say here is that if we take whatever that rate is, we take that, divide 70 by that rate, what we're going to get is essentially a time to double. And here's an important way of thinking about it. If our rate of natural increase is essentially 1%, it takes 70 years to double. That's why we call it the rule of 70. If it is the rate of natural increase is 2%, well, it's going to take 35 years, roughly. Rate of natural increase is half, it's going to take 140 years. So remember, all we have to do is take this number, again, so 70 divided by the rate of natural increase is our doubling time, the time it will take a population to double. And so if we look at RNIs by county, what we see is that, again, natural increase, once again, we see this corridor here of high rates of natural increase. We see it also out here on the West Coast, but we also see areas of negative, significant negative throughout the eastern part of the United States. And again, we actually see this industrial corridor through here. And so certain parts of the country are declining dramatically naturally, others are growing dramatically naturally. Okay, now, in terms of mortality and morbidity, this is the other half of the demographic equation. Change in populations, births minus deaths. Well, we have to deal with this part of it. We'll deal with immigration in a moment. One way that we understand this is how long people are going to live. This is what we would call the vital statistics and life expectancy. So for many of you, so again, this is in 2020, okay? If you were 20 in 2020, you can expect, again, this, if we read across this, you can expect another 58.5 years of life. If you're male, you're going to get slightly less, 55. If you're female, you're going to get significantly more, 61. If you are, again, any one of these other populations, you'll notice, and this is why we are often interested in race and ethnicity, it influences life expectancy. And now the question is why? And again, we'll get to that later on. But when we talk about mortality, crude death rates, deaths per thousand, we often deal with it in terms of that life expectancy. When are people going to die? And one of the things that we've noticed in the United States is, in general, our life expectancy was going up until about 2019. And then you'll notice in all cases, it began to go down. And it was the first time in a long time that that was the case. People are concerned about that. Different age groups have different life expectancies. And unfortunately, again, this is this significant concern. Hispanic and non-Hispanic African American populations, differences. And so again, what we notice here is that there are significant changes, again, between these 2 years. Again, 2019 to 2020. This is the one that we are dramatically concerned about. This drop is rather significant, and we have to evaluate that. Now, changes in life expectancy by birth, United States, 2019 to 2020. In other words, change in years. Black males dropped. In other words, the life expectancy of a black male in this country dropped by 3 years in a single year. The same is true, again, if we say, again, non-Hispanic black female dropped not as much, but quite a bit. Again, but in all cases, there was a decrease in life expectancy in the United States. Mortality increased. We have to ask the question, why? What is causing that? Now, again, across the United States, we see some interesting trends. You'll notice that this northern corridor doesn't quite have the same characteristics to it. What we do see is that the lowest life expectancies are in this Mississippi River corridor and kind of in this area in the Virginias coming down through it. And so again, significantly lower life expectancies through here, significantly higher life expectancies here. If we look at poverty, notice how closely this map matches. Poverty causes lower life expectancy. It's really that simple. Now, there are other factors, of course, but this is a concern. Life expectancy is influenced by affluence. The wealthier you are, the longer you live. And that, of course, brings us to the question of equity. Now, when we look at deaths, we're going to be talking a little bit about four measures. And those measures are going to be the crude birth rate, life expectancy, age-specific mortality rates, and DALYs. We'll break that into our next lecture. We'll see you then.